Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Laurin Macios, right?
Right.
Poet, and she directs mass poetry programs. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for
I
having
actually
me.
came over from Boston. I know
Yeah.
that's hard for a lot of people, as we were discussing. And in some of the programs she directs for mass poetry is the Student Day of Poetry, Poetry on the T, Commons, Threads, U35, and Professional Development, and manages a crew of dedicated volunteers and interns who make class poetry run smoothly. She holds an MFA from the University of New Hampshire, where she taught on fellowship for 3 years and has a background in publishing. Her publications, other poetic happenings can be found on, what's your website?
LaurinBeckerMacios.com.
Okay, so, and you're leaving to go to the Big Apple, right?
I am.
So we're getting you before you leave, and actually
Yes.
you're heading on a train
Yeah,
down to New York to start apartment hunting.
I am right after
this,
this.
right after this show. So you've heard it. You've heard it here. So it was interesting to hear as a child you were attracted to the smell of old books. Does aroma often, stoke your own poetic flame, so to speak?
It does, actually. I haven't thought about that in a while. Yeah, it does. Old books is a big one. But yeah, it does. I write a lot about, there are flowers in my poems a lot, and for me that's often the scent of the flowers. And yeah, that's a big one for me. I have a lot of memories attached to scents.
What is it about the scent of an old book that...
I don't know. I'm definitely one of those people that, I will never be a Kindle person. I love the book. I love holding it in my hands, and I feel like I have a relationship with the book that I read. And I think the scent of an old book to me it's just this kind of tangible air that book has been around for a long time, and a lot of people have had a relationship with that book, and I just
So
really
it's
love that.
promiscuous, huh?
It is. It's a promiscuous book.
Oh, okay. Everyone's had a relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. Touched it, and stroked it,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Okay. Now, you studied with Charles Simic at UNH and David Rivard at UNH. And now Simic was poet laureate at one point, wasn't he?
He was.
And he was the editor of the Paris Review, I believe.
Oh, I don't remember. I should know that.
Yeah, I think he was, because someone else was telling me. Jason Tandon
Oh,
was
yeah.
telling me, or I might be wrong, but anyway, needless to say, these are very prominent poets. So tell us about your experience with these two poets and how they influenced your work.
Sure. They influenced my work a great deal. And in very different ways, I would say David Rivard is, I feel like he's just a kind of a master wordsmith, and just uses language in interesting ways and is always challenging you to do that. And I actually sat in on pretty much all of David's workshops that I wasn't in, because I also found you can just learn a lot from listening to the critiques that other people get. And that affected my writing a lot. And Charles Simic's workshops are very, they're funny. It's very quick and gives you kind of his...
Just like his poems are pretty...
just like his poems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I like a lot. Most of my poems are short too. And it's just very to the point. And some of my very favorite advice from Charles Simic was, this poem needs a cat in it.
Needs a cat.
Needs a
I
cat.
agree. Having a cat named Ketz, and I've had cats for many years. I agree. A poem.
Yeah.
And I think people make fun of cat poems, but I think they can be very well done. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, what else were you saying about these folks?
Just that, yeah. And I think you have conference time with each of them, and I think that's an important time. And they I think there's a nice balance of, they get to know your poetry, but they also help you not kind of get too lost in what you want to do, and help you see kind of how to best do what it is that you want to do in your poem in ways you maybe wouldn't think about. And McKeel McBride is on that faculty too, and the three of them are really a trifecta. She's very intuitive, and I would say like a poet from the heart, and they just kind of come together in a really remarkable way.
Mm-hmm. Or she's a poet from the heart, or are there different types of poets? Is there a poet from the intellect more, or is it poet?
I work a lot with Alice Kachemba, the director of Calliope and many other things, and she distinguishes a lot between head and heart poems and head and heart poets, and I kind of like that. And I definitely McBride is a heart poet.
Okay. All right. And what's the difference? A heart is from a more emotional, or?
I think that even when McKeel would describe her poems, she describes them as like just they're more emotive, and like it's something washing over you. And the point of those poems is to feel it more so than to necessarily understand it, if that makes sense. More that emotional logic and emotional reasoning than sort of something that's in the head space.
I was going to say that this leads me to this is a good segue into this next question, because you have said in an interview I read with you that your poems never come from a place with the goal of making someone think.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can expand on that a little.
Yeah, that probably sounds really weird to a lot of people, but I think that's sort of what I mean. Is when I turn to poetry, it's to feel something, and I don't. When you read a poem and someone says, what is this about? I don't feel the need to be able to answer that question necessarily with poems that I read or poems that I write. As I think a lot of times we turn to poetry to write about things that aren't easily explained.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that...
I had a poetry student say to me, and he was a business major, and he said, well, why can't we just state the facts? Why can't we, why does this have to be so, elusive and metaphorical and all that, right? But go on, I'm just saying.
That's what a pie chart is for, that's what I would tell him, not a poem.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, your husband's a businessman, right?
Is.
He's a banker?
Yes.
So how does he deal with this?
Yeah. He enjoys it. He always says, I wouldn't want to come home to another version of myself.
Right.
And I feel the same way. So we balance each other out well. But he, in college, he double majored in finance and in English. So he's definitely a literature nerd like myself.
Oh, good. Well, that helps,
so
right?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. As a literature nerd with a good business sense, because most poets have no business sense and all that stuff. So, okay. I was going to ask you, you direct a number of programs over at Mass Poetry, one being U35, and the other one is Subway, Poems on the Subway. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about these programs, these innovative programs that you and Mass Poetry are undertaking?
Happily. Well, Poetry on the Tee is one of my favorites. So we very simply put poems into ad space on the tee. And we
just tee, is this a free service that the tee provides?
No, I wish it were. We get a nonprofit rate, and we look for sponsors. So we've been doing well with that this year. Actually, right now, we have 2 sets of Poetry on the Tee. One is sponsored by Penguin for Mary Oliver's new book. So there are Mary Oliver poems on the tee. And the other is sponsored by a group of poetry partners and friends of Mass Poetry, whose logos are on our website. And so those we have a variety of contemporary poems on the tee. And actually 3 new designs went up today, and in December we'll have 3 winners from a contest that we did.
Yeah, I just nominated a few. I think you sent out something wrong. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for participating in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so has that been success? Have people been responding to that?
It has. It's great. We get emails like, I was having a terrible day and I'm on my way home from work, and I look up and there's a poem on the tee, and it happened to be exactly what I needed at that moment. And that's why we all do what we do. So that's exciting.
Right. And it certainly place a lot of people are going to see it. Right.
Yes.
You know, these crowded subway cars, strap hangers, whatever. How about the U35 program?
U35, we adopted from Daniel Evans Pritchard, who was running it for about 4 years, and we took it over in May of last year. And that features 3 poets under 35 every other month, and they each read for 15 minutes, and there's like a break in between for mingling and all of that fun stuff. It's in a bar setting. And it's great. It's just, we video the readings and they're up on our website. So it's just a nice chance for poets who may be any level of experience. In our November 24th reading, there's a poet who just graduated from Suffolk. There's a poet who's, she's in her mid to late 20s and has a few publications, and there's a poet who has his MFA and leads workshops in schools and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had at Newton Free Library Series, I had Heather Tressler. I got her for your site. From your site, I was looking for some new poets, and Alexis. I'm trying to remember, but whatever. They were in the U35 pro. And a colleague of mine at Endicott is David's. He's a professor at Endicott College. David Seros. Not David Seros. David DeSaro.
DeSaro, yes.
Yeah. He just has a new book out by Finishing Line Press.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Now, there's a little poem, A Little Breath, I believe it is. Is it A Little Breath?
Yeah.
It's a poem. And it was about a cliff in Japan, I believe, and it has a little sign that says, repeat the saying. What does the sign say again about the little flower?
I think it says dead flower will never bloom.
Right, and I guess a lot of people take the jump, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe they've seen that, maybe they'll think twice. Do you have a hope that your poems in any way have changed lives, or, give some people hope, or have you ever got feedback about that from your own work?
I've never gotten that feedback, and I think I would have that hope, but I don't have that delusion, I would say. And actually, I workshopped that poem at Grub Street, and people thought it was a little too much in that way, like thinking, don't think that you could give people hope. But the poem to me is in the voice of actually the earth and just like I don't know. So, I think I have that hope.
Do you think poetry has that power?
I think poetry has that power, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for so many people.
Has there ever been a poem that you were in really the pits and it sort of brought you out of it?
Yeah, a poem, several, but one that immediately comes to mind is Dream Work by Mary Oliver.
Okay.
And also a lot of Whitman. In one of his poems, the lines, I divest myself of the holds that would hold me. I think there was probably 2 years of my life where I just repeated that to myself.
Sort of a mantra.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Yeah.
Now you have a background in publishing, educational publishing. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I worked at 3 different publishers, and the most well-known one is Pearson, and I worked in the marketing department, and I loved that. And my favorite part of that job was that you get free textbooks, and I took a lot of those home.
Oh, okay. You didn't steal them, right?
Yeah, no, you're allowed to have them.
I was going to ask you. I forgot what I was going to ask you. Oh yes. Well, we have another poetry festival, Mass Poetry Festival, coming up, and
yes.
Usually I do a little article in the or interview in the Summerville Times, which I'll do this year. But maybe you could just give us a little of what you know so far of what's going to be happening this year.
Yes.
Happening in Salem, and what date is it?
It's April 29th through
April 29th.
May 1st.
May 1st, okay.
Yeah, we've released a partial list of headliners. We'll have Marie Howe, Mark Doty, Charles Simic, David Rivard, Sandra Beasley, Ada Lamone. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, are you going to have a small publishing?
Yes, we'll have a small press fair on Saturday.
Okay.
And we'll have headline readings Friday night, Saturday night, and a couple times throughout the day on Sunday. And then there will be about 100 other sessions, which we're getting ready to send to our committee now to choose those.
Well, I remember the last thing I did there was Poets of McLean Hospital, the psychiatric hospital.
Yes.
It was at the Hawthorne Hotel. It was wonderful. They set up all kinds of jam-packed. We had a great audience. And then because of that success at the Mass Poetry Festival, I went on to the Boston Book Festival and did the same deal there. So and that was standing room only also, but it's a good experience. And, you write your proposal. It's nothing too complicated. And, you get paid, even money involved. So it's which is always good.
Perfect.
Anyway, so you got 15 minutes to read your poems.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you just let it rip.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting. All right. Let's see. I might rearrange these then. So I write a lot about, I'm very inspired by nature, which that wasn't always necessarily the case, but after a residency at the Martha's Vineyard Writers Residency, I kind of...
Well, nature to me is bird eating worms eating other worms. I don't know. I'm not a nature poet, but you go ahead.
I'm not sure if that's what this is. You'll have to tell me.
All right.
So this first one was written at the Martha's Vineyard Writers Residency and is called When You Feel Longing. But when you feel longing, there is somewhere to go. The tall grass flecked with ticks, searching with their legs for yours. The boardwalk made of leafless trees, staring all day at the full water, not at their own reflections, but at each wet molecule, together creating each wide wave, and each small fish curving its black body above the sand. When you feel longing, you are not a bride, not a bridge, not a bird, not a burrow hole, not a cave. You are a mountain, raised over years and years of your own listening. When you feel longing, you are the seafloor. You are the blind gossamer fish grazing it, its whole life one dark moment waiting for something to pass by. This next poem is called Wild, and it is inspired by the Colorado landscape, which is where my family lives.
Okay.
In the last clouded sky, you hold 3 tulips with 2 fingers. You say goodbye to the sun. You watch it creep below the water, the hills, the big boxy railroad car full of you don't know what. 3 deer run past, almost at your feet, and you yell at them to stop. But they are wild and run faster because you are wild too, just an animal standing upright, holding what you're too poised to eat. Suddenly the heads of the tulips, the bright red mouths are gone. Suddenly the clouds are eating the stems. Suddenly nothing is in your hand, cup now in the shape of what it used to hold. So I think when I write about nature, it's often about disappearance, I've noticed.
Disappearance of?
Nature, literally in that one.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Disappearances.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess we can look into the implications of that.
Let's see. This is called Watercolor, and this I wrote this July. I was at the Vermont Studio Center, and it's a residency where writers and artists, visual artists are there together, and I was really inspired just being around so many visual artists.
Yeah. I never go to writers' retreats, because I'm always retreating, and I figure I have to be out there, but,
Yeah. I depend on them for, a week or two to just...
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Right, yeah. So this is called Watercolor.
All right.
Take this apple. I will make you a mouth. Slippery tongue, strong teeth, lips to fatly press on its skin. The sun is an orphan, considering. The moon backs away from our hands. Take this bouquet of yellow roses I cut from the bush. A clay bust will appear that I will hollow out and fill with water. The scraps might become whatever you're imagining them to be. An ear, an elm tree, a bridge over these rocks, over the river. Anything but the river itself. Anything but your soul. It's in the pocket of every pair of discarded jeans. Take this thimble. Take this thread. This poem is actually inspired by my husband's family in New Jersey, who don't like deer very much.
Don't like to what?
Don't like deer very much.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a New Jersey thing that people don't really like deer.
Well, they carry ticks and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and they like just are up in their space and eating their tulips. Yeah.
Okay. You like deer?
I do. In Colorado, we have lots of deer, but it's kind of just a different landscape.
Okay.
So in Colorado, we like deer, so it was a surprise to me in New Jersey.
Okay.
So this is just a sort of surreal note that I thought a deer might leave after he ate my tulips. The Stag's Note. He said longing isn't love, isn't a barrel of something aged, seeping into something aging inside its old wooden curves. He said after it's been done, you'll glow like you've been lit, but have the scent of a candle just blown out. And you will finish the round walk, he said, heel meeting toe, slow, contrived, like your slim fingers steadying a red glass of wine. He said moonrise is a deer no one wants in their yard, but the guest who hushes the family, her finger to her lips. This next poem is about burritos, which are my version of tulips.
Oh. Never thought of that, but anyway.
They are to me what tulips are to a deer. It's called My Heart Belongs to Qdoba. Once a lady sweetly said, I have a weakness for flowers, and I wish I had a weakness so romantic, but mine is for burritos. From the place where you stand in a line against a counter and tell them that, and also that, and the verde one, and some cheese. And that's a difficult thing to admit to yourself, when even your future, your 30s, begin to take shape inside the charcoal corners of your brain, and they look like a hand pulling a red wallet from a purse and handing a credit card to a pierced cashier and solemnly lifting the bagged burrito and cradling it delicately under one arm.
I'll never think of a burrito the same way. Yeah.
Have you been to Qdoba?
What's that?
Have you been to Qdoba?
Oh, yeah.
It's
not bad. I like Anna's Taqueria down there.
Oh, I like that too.
Yeah.
That is good. Yeah. I have an unhealthy obsession with Qdoba ever since I worked there in college.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we all have our vices. So,
yeah. This next poem I wrote for a Samsara poetry contest, and the idea was to write about, the line they used was from that which came before to that which comes next. So this is what I wrote, and then I forgot to submit to it.
You forgot to what?
I forgot to submit the poem.
Well. Don't forget to submit to Ibbotson Street. I hope you'll do that.
I will certainly submit. Okay. Thank you. This is called Lineage. Through belly rise, she becomes her mother and her daughter. She becomes a basket filled with the curved spoon of a question mark. Her body is a Model T by Tuesday, a covered wagon by Wednesday. By the weekend, she is a wheel carved from stone. She sees a foot in her sleep step out of a woman's body to become a woman creating a woman from her body. From that which came before to that which comes next, the caterpillar whispers from a leaf in a jar. When the time comes, her mouth drops open like a drawbridge, and from it swarm 1,000 tiny voices, singing lullabies in the languages of her blood. So my next poem is my one really long poem. It's really long to me.
You got 5 minutes. So.
Okay. It's long to me. It just goes on to the second page, and it's one sentence.
What do you mean? It's never end? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the composition, it's always those run-on sentences, But,
yeah.
This is...
Yeah.
I won't show my kids this. All right.
It's called Only in My Dream You Were.
All right.
And that's also the first line. Only in my dream you were. a deep-sea squid with neon tentacles, becoming a chandelier, gallantly casting a blue hue on minuet dancers, one of whom you slowly became as she drank from a thin champagne flute filled with a small fern until her peep toes became the open mouths of two eels coiling their oily bodies around light poles illuminating the street on which you were born, all the sleeping windows sprayed with aerosol snow in the shape of your voice. A flimsy circle that doesn't quite meet, those circles becoming the irises of daisies coating a field wild with what sprouts and crawls, tame with daisy after daisy, a flower I once handed you not in a dream, but in a glass-walled room at the tip of a silver skyscraper the day before you stepped off its roof, becoming the pinch of song a finch sings and the branch on which it sings it, each leaf clean as a newborn, the cloud above it an ancestor holding a talisman, which appears in my dream as a cameo made of crushed conch shell, until the thin neck breaks like a wave I am riding inland, and I wake as soaked in seawater as if I were the fish I always worried I'd become. Its translucent skin one slick curve with no eyes to nestle, just a mechanism for putting off light, or feelers that reach far into the darkness against the cool bottom. And I do become it, I'm sure, the way you told me in the dream while you emptied a red purse of a grooved cherry stone, coaxing from it an oratorio, then slid it, shot loose as a dreaming eye, down your throat while you emptied your fern into the fountain next to you as it filled with coral and soil and two deer, one of which you became, while also being the man standing before it, feeding it crab apples from his cupped hands, which I think were supposed to be me.
No enjambment or anything there, huh? No.
Yeah.
If you had emphysema, it would be very difficult.
It would be
You
difficult.
couldn't catch your breath.
But it's grammatically correct as one sentence.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So should that be my last one?
No, actually, you still have a few more minutes. And for the sake of the tape, we'll let you read on.
Oh.
If you're in the middle of the poem. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Well, this one is called, for the time being, is called Everything Has Been Canned, so to speak. Slowly, well, that's relative, floated across the globe, sucking in its proverbial stomach to skirt the Panama Canal. Now we can live in the same cans, you're right, they're boxes, for $65K plus installation. At least we'll know the cans a little more intimately, watching the journey end for one right in our literal backyard. Every commodity has stacked inside the primary colored container, stacked upon container, upon container. All I can think about, that's a lie, is unpacking when they dock. All I can think of, see, is our monstrous scale. There is hardly a simile for it. So big we live inside pieces of it. So big we can't step back, our fingers grazing our chins. The whole Simic, how would we feel? Would our post-impressionist blotches blur into something we recognize, or become themselves the whole Pollock? The canvas we pock and streak and love, that special lump where we've hidden a nail next to a cigarette, and we'd think back fondly recalling the impression the canvas made in the grass, our collective body craned over it, creating. Some would have it put behind glass, no photos with flash, 24-hour security, and that would be smart. But also many of us can think, with a quick glance over our shoulders, is how might the brushstrokes feel on the tip of my finger.